appreciate everybody being here for this meeting as always. Maria, will you please call the roll?
Sure. Haif Abdullah, Mohammed Abuslam,
Present.
Kim Barrett,
Present.
Dan Bernal,
Present.
George Blumenthal,
Here.
Michael Botchin, Linda Boxer,
Present.
Judy Chow, Leander Clark Harvey,
Present.
Deborah Deese,
Here.
Anne Marie Dulege, Isabel Dudon, Mark Fisher Colbury,
Here.
Fred Fisher,
Present.
Elena Flowers,
Here.
Judy Gasson,
Here.
Larry Goldstein,
Here.
David Higgins,
Here.
Steve Julesgard,
Present.
Rich Lahara, Pat Levitt,
Here. Linda
Malkus,
Here.
Shlomo Melmed,
Here.
Christine Miskowski, Lauren Miller Rogan. I think I saw Lauren.
Here.
Are you on mute? Oh, there you
Here.
are. Thank you. Adriana Padilla,
Here.
Joe Panetta,
Here.
Al Rolette,
Here.
Barry Selleck,
Here.
Marvin Southard,
Here.
Michael Stamos, Jonathan Thomas,
Here.
Art Torres,
Present.
Carol Watson. Thank you, JT.
Okay, thank you, Maria. Go first here to the chair's report. Wanted to give everybody an update of where we are on the search for the new chair. So as you recall, we had originally calendared to have today as the day we were to consider the election of our new chair. As it happened, one of our two candidates, John Perez, made the decision to withdraw from consideration a couple weeks back and notified the governor, who had been his nominator for that, of that decision, at which point the governor nominated Dr. Vito Imbasciani as his new nominee. You all have received his information in the form of his letter of interest for the position, as well as his CV. He now will join Dr. Emily Marcus, who is our other candidate on the slate for consideration. And to give Dr. Imbasciani time to get into the process adequately, I immediately shifted gears and moved the election to our January 26th board meeting. As you recall, that election is to be preceded by a meeting of the governance subcommittee on the same subject, and that will be, do we have a date for that, Maria, at this point, do you know, or Marianne?
Yes, it's January 26th, and we're hoping that as many members can join.
No, the governance subcommittee, sorry.
Oh, governance, sorry, I think it is the 13th.
Okay.
Is that correct, Marianne?
right.
Great,
Yes.
thank you.
Okay, great, thank you. So as you may recall, the process is going to be for the governance subcommittee. Each candidate in turn in a closed session will read an opening statement, if you will, followed by an interview and Q&A with the governance subcommittee. That subcommittee will not be making a recommendation to the board. It will pass both candidates for consideration to the board. And at the board meeting, it will be a slightly different process. It will begin with each candidate reading their opening statement in public session, and then going in sequence to closed session for the same process of discussion, Q&A, et cetera, at which point the closed session will end. The board will reconvene in open session, and there will be a vote, and the new chair will be selected at that point. So that's going to be the process. Thank you for your flexibility on that. As it happens, because the January 26th meeting is going to be in person, our first one in basically 3 years. First of all, I hope we get as much attendance as possible. It'd be great to see everybody live as opposed to on Zoom all this time. Not that you don't look great on Zoom, of course, but be even better to see everyone in person, and it will give the candidates an opportunity to have face-to-face discussion, which, as we all agree, is preferable to having that sort of thing be over Zoom. So please do put that in your calendar, and we hope to see you on January 26th. So that is the process for that. My other topic is of course, very, very, very sad one, which is, as I notified the board a couple of days ago, we lost our beloved Director of Patient Advocacy, Kevin McCormick, to a heart attack on Sunday evening. This is something that we've been having a great deal of difficulty coming to grips with as an organization, and have had a lot of discussion about Kevin. We've had Maria Milan has arranged for grief counseling for the CIRM team, for everybody sort of trying to process this terrible news in their own way, but that's something that has been made available to help us do that. Kevin, as I said in my note to all of you, I so remember when we were looking for a director of communications 10 years ago, and he came into my office and was Kevin, as we all know him, which is infectiously enthusiastic, the sunniest and most optimistic of dispositions, expressed very clear interest in CIRM's mission, could not have been more interested in patient well-being, and had a kindness to him that sort of pervaded everything else. And so we hired Kevin at that point. He's been the principal driver of CIRM's message to the outside world for all these years. I think, unfailingly, everybody who knew him, came into touch with him, was always the better for that interaction. He just made everybody feel like he was talking to them, specifically about them, and in so doing, not only made them feel like they were the center of tension that they deserved to be, but was a tremendous ambassador for CIRM in spreading our message, and really was the best of what we do. He was just a consummate professional and approached it with such grace and dignity and sincere interest, and he just leaves, his passing leaves an enormous void for us, and it's something that we will never forget. What I'd like to do is to open this up to comments from members of the board. Obviously, we have been in great communication with his wife, Shirley, for whom we feel terrible, and are trying to do everything we can to help. It's just a very, very tough time, and I would appreciate if some board members would, if you would please like to share remembrances of Kevin, this would be a good time to do it. So Art, I know you wanted to start things off. If you could open here, please.
Yes. I first met Kevin years ago when we were working together to help build the new hospital for CPMC on Van Ness, which is now in existence and quite a monument to healthcare. And during that period of time, we worked on communications and also working on patient advocacy for that hospital and for the people and staff around that hospital. And I always remember those early times. But I also remember our relationship as an Irishman and a Mexican-American man. Few people remember that there was a great Los Patricios battalion, Irish soldiers that came to the defense of the Mexican revolutionary forces against the omnipresent powers in Mexico. And it was the Irish who really provided tremendous support for the revolutionaries in Mexico during that period of time. So we also held a special bond. In fact, there's a unit that's still in existence of ancestors of Los Patricios Battalion in Marin County, of all places. And so Kevin and I would always talk about that and always talk about his wife and his family. And he was very close to my son, Joaquin, as well. And so for me, it was shocking and it tore my heart apart. So to Kevin, may the road come to meet you. May the wind be always at your back. May the sun shine and warm upon your face. Rains fall softly upon your fields. And until we meet again, may God hold you in the hollow of his hand. God bless you, my friend.
Thank you, Art. That was beautiful. Mark.
Yeah, I can't match the eloquence of the statements reflecting Kevin. I can only give a tiny snapshot of my interactions with him over the years, many years, and I didn't have extensive interactions with CIRM. But without a doubt, every interaction with Kevin was exactly as described in terms of the focus, the genuine desire to hear and listen, the follow-up communications, the grace of, his incredibly difficult schedule, and at the same time dealing with a lot of different individuals. I just found extraordinary and just way beyond what I've run across with respect to folks that are in similar sets of circumstances. So just an unbelievably generous with his time and his thoughts and his execution and his follow-up with really good ideas and thoughts. And there's no question that we're gonna miss him a lot. So yeah, that just wanted to be able to share those thoughts.
Thank you, Mark. Joe.
Thanks, JT. And as Mark said, it's difficult to match the eloquence with which Art talked about Kevin. I've been on the board for a long time, and of course had the experience of working directly with Kevin as a board member. But I want everyone to know how important Kevin was to us at the organization that I run, Biocom California, which is the Life Science Association for the industry and research here in California, and also to ensure that products get to patients, just as is the mission of CIRM. We've got a communications department at Biocom that worked very closely with Kevin over the years. And not only was I devastated, but when I mentioned to Julie Ames, our VP of Communications, that we had lost Kevin, she was saddened and devastated. And she said two things: such an incredible, consummate, passionate professional, and just such a nice person to work with. So we're going to miss Kevin at Biocom California. But to add to Art's comments on Kevin as an Irishman, right after I joined CIRM, my wife, who is Irish, persuaded me to take our first trip to Ireland. And never having been to Ireland, I turned to Kevin and I said, this is what we're planning to do. We're going to take a trip to Dublin, in Galway and around the southern part of Ireland. Kevin and I must have spent an hour on the phone. He was my tour guide and told us everywhere we should go, every pub in Dublin and everything else that we should see while we were there. And I appreciated that so much, and I'll never forget that, and his enthusiasm about it, and just the fact that we had such a great time based on Kevin's recommendations in large part too.
Thank you, Joe. Anne Marie.
Yeah, so to add to that, I would say that Kevin lifted us up. He was making us better people, more enthusiastic, more optimistic, more energetic in general, just by his mere presence and his smile and his kindness. And yes, indeed, on top of everything we said, he went beyond the call of duty, and that was just him. So Joe, the example you mentioned is so telling. And I would say in my case, I had daughters in high school in journalism class. And once I asked him if he wanted to give a presentation about what he was doing at CIRM and medical journalism. And absolutely, he came to Palo Alto and gave, you can imagine him talking to teenagers, and he was as eloquent and inspiring as he was when he was talking to patients, activists, or us at CIRM and ICOC. So that was very much him.
Thank you, Anne Marie. David.
I think Kevin broke all the rules. You would think of Kevin as a consummate professional who could represent within minutes of a board decision, the board activity, but also as a human being, he was an incredible guy. We all know that. But what I think is maybe is missing from knowing Kevin, unless you know Kevin well, is that he never drew a line between those two. And that sounds like that would be unprofessional, but it's not. He was the same supportive patient advocate as in the bar having an Irish beer as he was. He did not separate those two. Those were two roles of one person. And I think he exemplifies how we all should be professional, of course, but you can also be human at the same time.
Thank you. Well said. Dan.
Yeah, well, I have to say, Kevin is one of the first people that we interact with when we become a board member. And I first met him many years ago when he used to work with CPMC when we did an event with the Child Healthcare Center. But the way that he was so welcoming and enthusiastic about all of our stepping up to serve on the ICOC, and the way he wrote too with just such vigor and enthusiasm was really in some ways really joyful. So certainly want to point out his role in really kind of bringing us in and socializing us into the organization and its culture along, he and Maria were so great in really bringing us on board and helping us feel welcome and really elevating our own sense of what we could contribute to the organization and how he would write about our joining the board. So it was really just a joy to work with him when I had the opportunity. So he'll be very sorely missed.
Thank you, Dan. Al?
I'd be remiss if I didn't recall an experience with Kevin where I was asked to contribute to a story, and being new to CIRM and not knowing what the particulars were, I asked Kevin, and he enthusiastically walked me through every particular scenario that you could imagine. And then afterwards said, and don't hesitate to call me during the interview if you have questions. And that kind of enthusiasm and that kind of commitment to the organization, he was conscientious about CIRM and cared about the organization very much. And it demonstrated caring for me as I was being asked questions about the organization as a relatively new board member at the time. And I recall saying something to him about not only was I prepared, I was over prepared, and how much I appreciated his work in that area. He will be missed as, again, the consummate professional.
Thank you, Al. Fred.
So this is so interesting because I only had one kind of experience with Kevin. And that was as a person who was enthusiastic and passionate about ALS, that when we engaged CIRM long before I was a board member, it was always about ALS. And mostly it was between him and my communications staffer. And they had this amazing relationship that made us feel really special. Kevin had no connection to ALS. His connection was to CIRM and the mission of CIRM. And it seems to me from listening to this today that he made everybody feel special about what they did, who they were, what their mission was. And he adopted it as his own because that was so much in alignment with what CIRM is about. And so as a communications person, he did kind of an amazing job of communicating just how important and valuable we were. His responsiveness really is what told us that. And it seems to me that in the context of this conversation, he did his job really well, because in reality, we weren't special at all. We were just one of the many pieces of the CIRM puzzle. And he likely made every single one of us feel special about who we were, what we were doing, and our connection to CIRM. And I think that's an amazing ability that will be very hard to follow in his footsteps, but sets a very high bar going forward.
Thank you, Fred. Also very well said. Judy.
I just have a couple things to add to everything that's been said. And obviously, I agree with all that's been said, and the warmth and the great interactions that we all had. Over the last year, I've had more interaction with Kevin than I had previously. And I just wanted to add to the qualities that we've been celebrating and will continue to celebrate: his unbelievable sense of humor. He had to be one of the most hilarious people I've ever interacted with. And it was always very professional, and it was always very appropriate, but he was so quick and so funny and so delightful to deal with. The last 2 emails I got from him were addressed, "Dear lovely people," which I thought was just a remarkable way that Kevin interacted with all of us. Thank you.
Beautiful, beautiful, Judy.
Thank you, Judy. Isabel.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. It's very hard for me to talk about Kevin because we actually worked together for many years at KRON, and he was the producer of one of my award-winning series on my own cancer experience. And I've always had a really close-knit relationship with Kevin. And so was very thrilled when I came aboard CIRM, knowing he was here, to be able to come back and work with him. When I heard about the news, my first thought was, what are we going to do without him? I particularly appreciated him because he was always the, in some ways, the wind beneath my wings, telling me and helping me and reminding me what we were doing, why we were doing it, and what was good about what we were doing. And so I'm really, really going to miss him. He was, I think, as Judy said, everybody said he was a joy to be around. I'm going to miss that accent. I'm going to miss that brogue. I'm going to miss him a lot, and I probably can't even begin to count the ways at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Isabel. And thank you, members of the board.
Alert from no backups for 31 days.
What was that? I think this has been a wonderful tribute to Kevin. I should just say that in my capacity as as the designated major sports fan of the board, one of my last exchanges was pointing out to Kevin how the US actually outplayed England in the World Cup match, which of course he took great exception to, and pointed out that they fared better later on than we did. So I just want to end with something Judy said, which I think just exquisitely captured Kevin, which was that he did refer to all of us as lovely people. And that was an expression he used that was just very fitting of his life view and how he engaged with us and everybody in a special way. And I wanted to point out to the board that a great member of our communications, Katie Sharifi, has taken up that expression in her emails as well, which I think is, we didn't know at the time, but will be a wonderful ongoing tribute to Kevin. So Katie, I know you're listening, and we will never be able to see that expression without being reminded of Kevin, which is a wonderful thing. So thank you, everybody, members of the board, for this very moving tribute. Okay. We are going to move on next to the consent calendar. And
JT, Michael has his hand raised. I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Michael. Yes, sir.
Yep. Thank you. Good morning. Sorry, I didn't get a chance to ever meet Kevin in person, so I don't have anything to add, but obviously a big loss. But I had a question about the previous conversation about the ICOC meeting in January 26th.
Yes, sir.
And ironically, since I was also encouraging us to meet in person, I can't make it because of prior commitments in person, but back here in town. I think that will still give me full capacity to be involved and to vote, et cetera. Is that correct? I will be available during that time. I just can't be there on site.
Yes, for those who
Yes.
can. Yes.
It'll be a
Great,
hybrid
thank you.
meeting. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. I'm sorry about that. I will make every effort to make the future meetings, which I think are now in the books for later in the year, but thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay. We have 5 items on the consent agenda. Are there any items anybody wants removed at this point? Otherwise, we will take them en banc for consideration. Is there a motion to approve the consent calendar?
So moved.
Second, Marv Southard.
Thank you. Moved by Art, seconded by Marv. Maria, will you please call the roll?
We need public comment.
Oh, yeah.
Or we don't need it, but we should ask for it.
That's a good point. Yes. Any public comment on these topics?
I know this will be crazy. No hands raised.
That's okay. Well, it's that's just the way it is. So, okay, Maria, will you please call the roll?
Haif Abdullah. Mohammed Abu Salam.
Yes.
Kim Barrett.
Aye.
Dan Bernal.
Aye.
George Blumenthal.
Yes.
Michael Botchin. Linda Boxer.
Yes.
Judy Chow. Leandra Clark Harvey.
Yes.
Deborah Deese.
Yes.
Anne Marie Dulege.
Yes.
Isabel Dudon.
Yes.
Mark Fisher Colbury.
Yes.
Fred Fisher.
Yes.
Elena Flowers.
Yes.
Judy Gasson.
Yes.
Larry Goldstein.
Yes.
David Higgins.
Yes.
Steve Julesgard.
Yes.
Rich Lahara. Pat Levitt.
Yes.
Linda Malkus.
Yes.
Shlomo Melmed.
Yes.
Christine Miskowski. Lauren Miller Rogan.
Yes.
Adriana Padilla.
Yes.
Joe Panetta.
Yes.
Al Rolette.
Yes.
Barry Selleck.
Yes.
Marvin Southard. Michael Stamos.
Yes.
Jonathan Thomas.
Yes.
Art Torres.
Aye.
Carol Watson. The motion carries.
Thank you, Maria. Okay, we're going to go now into the application review subcommittee portion of the meeting for item 9, consideration of applications submitted in response to clinical trial stage projects program announcement, CLIN 1 or 2, presentation by Dr. Sombrano. Gil.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So good morning, all. Today, I'm going to present the recommendations from the latest cycle of our CLIN opportunity. As we always do, we want to remind everybody about our mission and why we do what we do, is to accelerate world-class science to deliver transformative regenerative medicine treatments in an equitable manner to a diverse California and world. This is a reminder of the status of our clinical budget. We have an allocation of $169 million for the fiscal year. And thus far, the board has approved about $55 million in awards. The total amount requested today from 4 applications totals about $29 million. And if those are approved, we would be right about halfway in terms of the budget on the $169 million for this year. And we're right at the middle of the year, so we're right on target. The scientific scoring system that we use, or that the Grants Working Group uses to score applications in the clinical program, is on a scale of 1, 2, or 3. A score of 1 means that an application has exceptional merit and warrants funding. A score of 2 means that the applicant will get a summary of concerns and areas for improvement, and those usually will go back to the CWG before they come to the board if they ever do. And then a score of 3 is for applications that are sufficiently flawed that they would not warrant funding, and we don't allow resubmission for at least 6 months. So this is a go back and rethink the project. The review criteria that the score is based on are the following 5 questions. Does the project hold the necessary significance and potential for impact? Meaning, what value does it offer, and is this something that ultimately is worth doing and going to impact patients? Is the rationale sound? Is the project well planned and designed? And is it feasible, including whether they have the appropriate resources and the team personnel to carry it out? And lastly, does the project uphold the principles of diversity, equity, and inclusion? The composition of the Grants Working Group that reviews these applications includes the Scientific Grants Working Group members that are all outside of California. And they provide the scientific evaluation, and we bring experts from a variety of perspectives to the table, including disease area experts, those that are familiar with regulatory, CMC manufacturing, product development, and other areas as needed. And they provide the scientific score on all the applications. The Grants Working Group also includes our patient advocate and nurse members who are also members of this board. They provide CEI evaluation, the patient perspective on the significance and impact of these projects, and provide oversight on the process itself. The Grants Working Group patient advocate members provide a DEI score on all applications and also provide a suggested scientific score. We also bring on board scientific specialists as needed to fill in any knowledge gaps or areas of expertise that are required into the from the panel. These members provide a scientific evaluation, but do not provide a final score. Okay, so we're going to get into each of the applications, and as I introduce each of these applications, which we will consider individually, I'm just going to show you a slide like this that shows the board members that may have a conflict of interest with the application. So in this case, those members that are listed on this table have declared a conflict with this application, and so therefore please be mindful of that as we get into the discussion and voting. So this application is titled Development of an Engineered Autologous Leukemia Vaccine for Stimulating Cytolytic Immune Responses to Residual Leukemic Stem Cells. This is a genetically modified cancer cell vaccine, and it is targeting acute myeloid leukemia, or AML. And the goal of this project is to complete IND-enabling studies and to file an IND. The amount of funds requested is $6 million. There is no co-funding and not required for this applicant. A little bit of background on AML. About 20,000 new cases of AML are diagnosed each year in the US, with a 5-year survival rate of about 29%. So there's clearly a significant unmet need here, and many patients will relapse after treatment. And hematopoietic stem cell transplant, which is one of the approaches for treating AML, can be curative, but many older patients don't qualify for this. And so a need, particularly for older patients, of a therapy that is less toxic is an unmet need. The proposed therapy utilizes a vaccine approach to stimulate an immune attack against the cancer via genetic modification and expression of the immune markers on cancer cells. And that approach has the potential for long-term effectiveness as it targets both AML blasts and leukemic stem cells that are often the source of relapse. And this particular project qualifies for CIRM funding based on the fact that it targets cancer stem cells and also that it involves a gene therapy approach. Similar projects that exist in our active current portfolio include 2 other phase 1 stage clinical trial projects that are addressing AML or more broadly other leukemias. These approaches are quite different. They're not vaccine approaches. One is a monoclonal antibody, and the other is the T-cell immunotherapy. So this would add another very different approach to AML. This applicant has received CIRM funding in the past for earlier stage projects at the translational stage for the AML. And the project outcome for what we funded was to conduct a pre-IND meeting, which was done and was successful. And so that is the prelude project to the current application, Clean One application. This is a summary of the recommendation from the Grants Working Group. The Grants Working Group unanimously scored this a 1 with 15 members giving it that score. It received a DEI score of 9 on a scale of 1 to 10. And the CIRM team recommendation is to fund this project for $6 million. Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Gil. Do we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second, Marv Southard.
Seconded by Marv. Do we have?
I'm sorry, who was the first? I missed that.
Michael Stamos.
He cannot make a motion. He is not on the application review subcommittee.
Yes, you're right.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Oh, it's okay.
Marv, would you like to move up to the full position here?
Yes.
Thank you. Do
Go
we have
ahead.
a second?
I can second.
Okay, seconded by Anne Marie. Questions or comments from members of the board? Any comments from members of the public? Hearing none, Bria, will you please call the roll?
Yes. Dan Bernal,
Aye.
Judy Chow, Leander Clark Harvey,
Aye.
Anne Marie Dulege,
Aye.
Isabel Dudon,
Aye.
Mark Fisher Colbury,
Aye.
Fred Fisher,
Aye.
David Higgins,
Yes.
Steve Julesgard,
Yes.
Rich Lahara, Lauren Miller Rogan,
Yes.
Adriana Padilla,
Yes.
Joe Panetta,
Yes.
Al Roulette,
Yes.
Marvin Southard,
Yes.
Jonathan Thomas,
Yes.
Art Torres. Art, are you
Yeah, I'm
there?
sorry. Aye.
Thank you. The motion carries.
Thank you. Next, Gil.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. The next application, please note the following board members who may have a conflict of interest with this application. This is CLIN 1-14006, and the title is Hematopoietic Stem Cell Gene Therapy for Treatment of Tay-Sachs Disease. This is an autologous gene-modified blood stem cell therapy for Tay-Sachs disease. The goal of this project is to complete IND-enabling studies and file an IND that will allow them to begin a clinical trial. The funds requested are just a tad over $4 million. No co-funding is required for this application. Background on this disease indication: Tay-Sachs disease is a rare genetic disorder that causes an accumulation of gangliosides that build up to toxic levels in cells, particularly neurons, and so that results in neurodegeneration. There are a number of manifestations of the disease, and it includes an infantile, a juvenile, and adult forms, with the infantile and juvenile being the most severe, and often leading to death at a very early age. Over 100 mutations in the disease-causing XA gene have been identified that result in the enzyme dysfunction. For this therapy, the value proposition, there are currently no effective therapies or cures for Tay-Sachs. The proposed candidate has the potential to produce and deliver the HEX enzyme via an autologous blood stem cell transplant to restore function in cells. So the delivery of the blood stem cells will allow them to produce, secrete the enzyme and deliver it to neurons and other cells that require it. The reason that this qualifies as a CIRM project, the candidate is composed of blood or hematopoietic stem cells, making it a stem cell project. We don't have in our active portfolio any projects that are focused on Tay-Sachs disease at the moment. The applicant has received previous CIRM funding for a translational stage award for Tay-Sachs disease and for development of this project. The outcome that we funded them for was to achieve pre-IND meeting, which they succeeded in doing. This is a summary of the grants working group recommendation for this application. This received a unanimous score of 1 from 14 members of the working group. It received a DEI score of 7.5, and the CIRM team recommendation is to fund this application for the award amount shown of just over $4 million. Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Gil. Do we have a motion to approve? Let's not be shy.
So moved.
Moved
Mark
by
Fisher
Mark.
Colby, so moved.
There's a second?
Second.
Is that Joe?
Yes.
Yes, thank you, Joe. Questions or comments from members of the board?
Mr. Chairman, I have a comment.
Yes,
would be helpful in the future in presenting these projects on the slide where we mentioned previous funding that the applicant received. It would be helpful if we mentioned the amount for each of those awards they received in the past, the dollar amount.
Okay,
thank you.
Duly noted. Other questions or comments from members of the board? Any public comment?
No.
Hearing none, Maria, will you please call the roll?
Dan Bernal,
Aye.
Judy Chow, Leandra Clark Harvey,
Aye.
Anne Marie Dulege,
Aye.
Isabel Dudon,
Yes.
Mark Fisher Colbury,
Yes.
Fred Fisher,
Yes.
Elena Flowers,
Yes.
David Higgins,
Yes.
Steve Julesgard,
Yes.
Rich Lahara, Christine Miskowski, Lauren Miller Rogan,
Yes.
Adriana Padilla,
Yes.
Joe Panetta,
Yes.
Al Roulette,
Yes.
Marvin Southard,
Yes.
Jonathan Thomas,
Yes.
Art Torres.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Next, Gil.
Okay, for this next application, I'm not showing you a COI slide because there were no declared conflicts for this. So this application is CLIN 14140, and the title of the application is IND enabling activities for a mass immunocytokine. Therapy is a antibody and interferon alpha fusion protein, and it is targeted to advanced or metastatic solid tumors and multiple myeloma. The goal of this project is to complete IND enabling studies and file an IND. The amount requested is just under 4 million. Co-funding is required for this applicant of 20%, is providing just under 1 million. All right, the background on this particular set of indications. So there are cancers that have a prevalence of CD138 expression, including multiple myeloma and several types of solid tumors. And there are a variety of treatments that are approved for these, but often patients will experience advanced or metastatic disease, will relapse or are refractory to many of those treatments. Interferon alpha therapies are available to treat multiple myeloma following first in-line therapy, but can be limited by toxicities, meaning the dose that can be applied is very limited due to systemic-wide toxicity. If successful, the proposed therapy would provide a safer and effective therapeutic option for patients due to its targeted via the antibody component and mass delivery of the interferon to the tumor site, which reveals the interferon alpha only after it reaches the tumor, and therefore allowing greater dosing of this product. This is a therapeutic candidate that targets cancer stem cells and therefore why it qualifies for CIRM funding. This is the list of projects in our portfolio that in one way or another address solid tumors broadly or more specifically multiple myeloma. We do have other projects that target different types of cancers and tumors. These three I thought were the most related to this project because of its broad aspects to solid tumors or because of multiple myeloma. The approaches that are taken on by these other portfolio projects vary. One uses an oncolytic virus within induced killer cells. Two others use a CAR-T approach, one that is focused on using natural killer T cells. So a bit different in terms of their approach compared to the current project. This applicant has not previously received CIRM funding. And the summary of the grants working group recommendation is as shown. There were 11 members who gave it a score of 1, 3 that gave it a score of 2, and 1 that gave it a score of 3. The DEI score for this application is a 6 on a scale of 1 to 10, and the CIRM team recommendation is to fund for the amount shown just under 4 million. Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Gil. Do we have a motion to approve?
So moved. Marv Southern.
Thanks, Marv. Is there a second?
Second, Isabel.
Thank you, Isabel. Questions or comments from members of the board? I actually have a question, Gil. many of the things that we have funded over the years sort of have applicability to either blood cancers or solid tumors. How many like this do we have that actually has an aspect potentially of both?
It's unusual. Many of the projects, as you noted, either focus on solid tumors generally, or on one specific solid tumor, or on blood leukemias, or such as AML or other things. But yes, it's unusual to have something that broad scope like this.
Thank you. Just wanted to bring that to the attention of the board. Other comments or questions from board members?
I've got my hand up, JT.
Yes, Fred.
Gil, I'm wondering if you can provide us any further insight, given that it seems like about a third, or maybe a little more than a third, of the GWG thought that it should come back or not be funded at all. And if you have any more to say about that.
Sure. Yes, and you know, in looking at the rationale behind the scores of 2 or 3, I think most of this, and you know, I can't tell you exactly why a reviewer gave the particular score they did, but based on comments and discussion, it seems to focus on their belief that this is acting specifically on cancer stem cells or not. So for projects like this, the requirement or eligibility criteria for coming in is that they act in some way on a cancer stem cell, and that the mechanism of action is in some way related to that action on the cancer stem cell. And that's the basic requirement. And so the reviewers, when they consider these projects, will often have varied opinions as to where they set the bar as to how specific the product needs to be. Some reviewers will feel it needs to be exclusively acting on cancer stem cells to give them more confidence that the MOA is really through the cancer stem cells. Others view it as a more flexibility in terms of acting on cancer stem cells, but also on other cells of the cancer or tumor. And a lot of the discussion related to those differences, I think, is reflected in those scores.
Thanks.
Thank you, Fred. Other questions or comments from members of the board? Any public comment?
No hands raised, JT.
Thank you. Maria, will you please call the roll?
Dan Bernal,
Aye.
Judy Chow, Leander Clark Harvey,
Aye.
Anne Marie Dulage,
Aye.
Isabel Dudon,
Aye.
Mark Fisher Colbury,
Aye.
Fred Fisher,
Aye.
Elena Flowers,
Yes.
David Higgins,
Yes.
Steve Julescart,
Yes.
Rich Lahara, Christine Miskowski, Lauren Miller Rogan,
Yes.
Adriana Padilla,
Yes.
Joe Panetta,
Yes.
Al Rolette,
Yes.
Marvin Southard,
Yes.
Jonathan Thomas,
Yes.
Art Torres,
Aye.
Carol Watson. Motion carries.
Thank you, Maria. Last CLEN for this meeting, Gil.
Okay, for this next application, here is the list of conflicts for the application. And this is CLIN 2-14302. It's entitled Phase 3 Trial and Related Activities to Support Clinical Development of Genetically Modified Human Umbilical Cord Derived Vascular Endothelial Cells. This is a cell therapy, genetically modified endothelial cells. The indication is for severe regimen-related toxicities from treatment for lymphoma. The goal is to complete a phase 3 trial. The funds requested are $15 million. co-funding of 40% is required and provided in the just over $10 million amount from the applicant. So background on this, cancer therapies often employ regimens that damage otherwise healthy tissues and organs. And severe regimen-related toxicities, or SRRT, is something that can become life-threatening and limits the effectiveness of therapies, including hematopoietic stem cell transplants, as the dosing has to be limited in order to avoid such severe toxicities, and often that results in less effective treatment against the cancer. The standard of care for the SRRT includes prophylactic supportive treatments to address symptoms. However, the proposed therapy here aims to target the underlying cause of the SRRT by acting on and restoring the endogenous stem cell vascular niche in organs. And if successful, this approach could significantly improve outcomes for patients undergoing a variety of therapies for cancer. The target for this particular trial is on lymphoma patients, but could have much broader implications if it's successful. The candidate targets endogenous stem cells for its therapeutic effect, and that is why it is qualified for funding. The similar projects in our portfolio include one that is marginally related. This is a phase 1 clinical trial that is focused on treating graft versus host disease that's related to treatment in B-cell cancers and leukemias. So this is similarly a toxicity, if you will, following treatment that this candidate, which is a T-cell immunotherapy, attempts to address. And so it is somewhat similar, but not focused necessarily on the SRRT as broadly as in this particular proposal. This applicant has received CIRM funding in the past and has 2 projects that are related. There was a CLIN1 and a CLIN2 shown here. So the IND enabling work in phase 1 trial for an immune blood cell reconstitution following myeloablation. So the goal behind this was that their product would help reconstitute the immune system and the blood cells. This is a cell therapy that went and is still going, I think, may still be active in a phase 1 trial. And then we also funded an initial trial, phase 1 trial of this current indication for the severe regimen-related toxicity that we supported, and that project ended in April. And they were successful in meeting all their milestones. And then just to note, the award amounts are shown here that we have provided to the current applicant. This is a summary of the grants working group recommendations. We had 10 members who gave this a score of 1, 3 members that gave it a score of 2. The DEI score was an 8 on a scale of 1 to 10, and the CIRM team recommendation is to fund this project for $15 million. Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Gil. Motion to approve.
So moved, David San Diego.
Thanks, David. Second.
Second.
Who was that second? Sorry.
It was Dan.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. Questions, comments, members of the board? Anne-Marie?
Yeah, briefly, actually, mostly a comment. Phase 3 trial, remarkable milestone, very risky and challenging. Congratulations to the CIRM for moving or helping to move many, compounds to this stage. Can you remind us, it probably has nothing to do with the vote, with how many phase 3 trials have we funded so far?
I don't know the answer
Roughly.
to that.
Yeah.
Abla, Christy, if you're on, or Maria Milan, you may have a better sense.
Or maybe
that.
separate. I realize there's nothing to do, but I just wanted to point out that
Mm-hmm.
we rarely get to vote on phase 3 trials, and this is always an exciting step.
Yes, it is. It is unusual. We've had very few that have come through, but we have had at least 2 or 3 over the course of several years that we've funded.
Great. Major milestone. That's it.
Thank you, Anne Marie. Other questions or comments from members of the board? Any public comment?
I do not see any.
Thank you. Maria, will you please call the roll?
Dan Bernal,
Aye.
Judy Chow, Leandra Clark-Harvey,
Aye.
Anne Marie Duledge,
Yes.
Isabel Duron,
Yes.
Mark Fisher Colbury. Mark, are you on? Fred Fisher,
Yes.
Elena Flowers,
Yes.
David Higgins,
Yes.
Steve Julesgard,
Yes.
Rich Lahara, Christine Miskowski, Lori Miller Rogan,
Yes.
Adriana Padilla,
Yes.
Joe Panetta,
Yes.
Al Rolette,
Yes.
Marvin Southard, Marv. Okay. Jonathan Thomas,
Yes.
Art Torres.
Aye.
And I
The
vote
motion-
yes. This is
Oh.
Marv. I vote yes. I was just muted.
Oh, thank you, Marv. The motion definitely carries. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Gil, and your review team. That concludes the application review subcommittee portion of today's meeting. We'll move on next to item 10, consideration of new members to the standards working group. Jeff Lomax. Jeff.
Thanks. And I think we have some slides that are going to come up.
Yes, Marianne's getting those ready.
Chairman Thomas, members of the board, my name is Jeff Lomax, Senior Science Officer with the Medical Affairs and Policy Team. As you may recall at our September 29th meeting, I provided you with an update on the charge of the Standards Working Group, contemporary issues in biomedical research, ethics, and policy, and I described the process for recruiting members to the working group, which is illustrated in this slide. At the September meeting, you also confirmed Jeffrey Kahn and Fred Fisher as co-chairs to the working group, in part to support the recruitment process. I'd also like to acknowledge Chairman Thomas's leadership in candidate recruitment. Today, I bring for your consideration a roster of candidates. Pursuant to Proposition 14, the candidate pool includes medical ethicists, scientists and clinicians, and ICOC patient advocate and nurse members. Your background materials provide a brief biosketch for each of the medical ethicists and scientific members, and also includes a link if you're interested in a more comprehensive biosketch for each of the candidates. I will now briefly review the medical ethicists and scientist clinician candidates for consideration. Next slide, please. First, the medical ethicist candidates. Ms. Terry brings expertise in genetic privacy and data sharing with a strong emphasis on patient engagement and empowerment in research. Ms. Lopes brings regulatory policy expertise with an emphasis in the design and implementation of guidelines and policies in stem cell research oversight at a major academic institution. And Dr. Ramanfanger brings leadership in neuroethics and was deemed important given CIRM's commitment to diseases of the brain and neurodegenerative diseases. And just as a reminder, Jeff Kahn rounds out the 4 positions, the medical ethics, the ethics ethicist positions, and again, he was acknowledged in the September meeting. Next slide, please. The scientific and clinician candidates, Dr. Royce brings brings unique experience in both clinical research and community engagement, in addition to being an active member of the Grants Working Group. And the crossover between, I think, Grants Working Group and the Standards Working Group is very important, as it gives the perspective of the rigor that goes into the scientific evaluation of CIRM applications. So we see a lot of value there. Dr. Lee brings a broad understanding of the basic and translational space with particular insights into animal research ethics. Dr. Saha combines stem cell engineering, gene editing, and reprogramming with a very unique background in both medical history and ethics, and has served on numerous ethics policies advisory committees in addition to the Grants Working Group at CIRM. Dr. Sharma brings clinical experience in gene therapy for sickle cell disease, combined with extensive scholarship into patient education and consent. He will be providing a review of his work at the January Standards Working Group meeting, if confirmed. Dr. Wagner, who has worked on rare genetic disorders and has frequently addressed risk-benefit considerations in experimental gene therapies, and is also active on the Grants Working Group. And finally, Dr. Rousson is one of the world's leading scholars in developmental biology and embryo research, and she received the 2021 ISSCR, that's the International Society for Stem Cell Research, Achievement Award for her work in developmental biology. Next slide, please. And finally, a reminder of the patient advocate and nurse candidates who have agreed to serve on the Standards Working Group, and we thank you sincerely for your service. So this rounds out the roster of candidates, and the CIRM team recommends approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lomax, Dr. Lomax. I just wanted to point out that the task of putting together this group was a considerable one, which involved a lot of work under Dr. Lomax's leadership in sourcing the right combination of folks to bring to bear in this working group, so that we have a lot of different things brought to the table that will bear on the various issues that the working group considers. So thank you, Jeff, for your hard work on that. Do we have a motion to approve this roster?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by.
I'm sorry, who was the first?
Kim.
Kim, great. Thank
Seconded
you.
by Art. Questions or comments from members of the board? I also want to point out, by the way, Fred, thank you for being vice chair. This is a very important task, and you brought a lot of leadership already to this point, and of course will continue as things play out down the road. So thank you.
Thank you.
Comments from members of the public? Hearing none, Maria, will you please call the roll?
Sure. Just as a reminder, Leandra and Elena, since you are on the roster, I will not call your name. Haif Abdullah,
Yes.
Mohammed Abuslam,
Yes.
Kim Barrett,
Aye.
Dan Bernal,
Aye.
George Blumenthal,
Yes.
Michael Botchin, Linda Boxer,
Yes.
Judy Chow, Deborah Deeth,
Yes.
Anne Marie Dulege,
Yes.
Isabel Dudon,
Yes.
Mark Fisher Colbury, Fred Fisher,
Yes.
Judy Gasson,
Yes.
Larry Goldstein,
Yes.
David Higgins,
Yes.
Steve Julesgard,
Yes.
Rich Lahara, Pat Levitt,
Yes.
Linda Malkus, Shlomo Melmed,
Yes.
Lauren Miller Rogan,
Yes.
Adriana Padilla,
Yes.
Joe Panetta,
Yes.
Al Rolette,
Yes.
Barry Selleck,
Yes.
Marvin Southard,
Yes.
Michael Stamos,
Yes.
Jonathan Thomas,
Yes.
Art Torres.
Aye.
The motion carries.
Thank you, Maria. On to item 11, consideration of amendments to the Shared Resource Labs Concept Plan, presentation from Dr. Grisheimer. Uta?
Yes, thank you, Chairman Thomas. Good morning, everyone. I'll share my screen. Give me a moment. Sorry. I seem to be clicking this button here. Hang on 1 second. Apologize. There we go. So yeah, good morning. On behalf of the scientific programs team, I will be presenting a small amendment to the concept plan for shared resource laboratories for stem cell-based modeling, or as I'll be calling it, SRL for short. The SRL concept is aligned with CIRM's mission to accelerate world-class science, to deliver transformative regenerative medicine treatments in an equitable manner to a diverse California and world. So, okay. You all approved the Shared Resources Lab concept in October. And today we are bringing a proposed change to you for your consideration, a change in the percent effort commitment will require from the applicant program director. Before I present the specific proposed amendment, I'd like to provide some background information and rationale for our request. We expect that leadership for a Shared Resource Labs Award would provide 3 main functions. First, they would be expected to ensure the scientific excellence of the stem cell-based models that are offered in their Shared Resource Labs core. Second, they would be expected to contribute to the steering committee that will consist of the awardees and also external stakeholders. As a quick reminder, the steering committee will be charged with developing processes to coordinate a network of shared resource labs, developing certain standards across the network, and developing collaborative approaches toward improving reproducibility of stem cell-based models. And third, the SRL leadership would oversee the operations of their core facility. So we realized that the goals of a shared resource lab may best be achieved by a leadership team consisting of 2 individuals rather than a single program director. One reason being that these 3 functions require diverse types of expertise. And another consideration is that we want to make sure we can attract scientific leaders in stem cell-based modeling to apply for this opportunity without having to commit too high a percent effort. So our request of the board today envisions that in addition to the program director, applications may propose to include a second key person with a leadership role. The original concept stipulated that program directors must commit at least 20% effort, and we are now proposing to change this as outlined here. The applicant program director must commit at least 5% effort, and the overall leadership for a shared resource lab must commit at least a combined effort of 20%. This can be achieved by a single program director with a 20% effort, or by a program director with 1 additional key person in a leadership role. So I'd now like to ask that the board approve this amendment to the Shared Resource Labs concept plan, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Uta. We hear a motion to approve.
So moved. Marv Southern.
Thank you, Marv. Doing a lot of moving today.
Now.
Second.
Second, this is Haifa.
Thanks, Haifa. Okay. Questions or comments from members of the board?
Mohammed has his hand raised, as does Pat and Anne Marie.
Okay, Mohammed.
Thank you, JT. A question, Uta, do you have a definition for what a program director role entails and what the second leader role entails? Because if we're going from 20% to 5% on the program director, what might we miss from that responsibility if that second leadership role is not defined?
Thank you. So I think my general answer is that the three leadership functions that I presented would be expected to be covered by the two individuals, and we would leave it to the applicant team and the one or two people they bring forward to make a case that these three leaderships roles are well covered by either the one person or the two people. I think an example of what I could envision is that a program director would, with let's say 5 or 10%, so they have, of course, they can choose, how they distribute their effort. And the program, so one scenario I envision is that the program director would, with let's say 5 or 10% effort, would be responsible for the overall excellence of the stem cell-based models and the participation on the steering committee that will drive these network functions, while a second person in the leadership role might be more focused on the overseeing the operations at a high level of the actual core.
Thank you.
Pat?
So, 5% effort, I've rarely seen that even on individual R01s at NIH or individual grants from, and I'm a bit worried considering the responsibilities that the facilities have in terms of distribution of resources as well as maintaining excellence within the core itself. And so I'm worried at 5% for the program director, whoever that is clearly going to have to be part of steering committees, interact with other centers, and then maintain I think a deep understanding of ensuring the quality of what is being generated, distributing protocols, working with the new centers that are going to be established, all those responsibilities to me. I mean, 5% is 2 hours a week, right? Based on the calculations that NIH does. And I can understand 10%. 10% is the norm for senior investigators in particular for extramural grants. So I really struggle with this 5%.
Thank you for your perspective. And I would certainly offer that the board, can decide to, what the percentage should be and amend the amendment if you so like. It would certainly be up to you.
Okay, so I think Uta, Pat's comments I found persuasive, and Pat, are you recommending that the motion be amended to increase 5 to 10%?
I would do that, but I think we should hear from others first before we entertain any changes to the original amendment. I may be in the minority in terms of my views, and I don't want to independently drive the process. I just put my feelings, my perspective out there. Also, having run cores myself and now overseeing, a lot of cores of the institution that I'm at. So, it would be good to hear from others.
Okay, Anne-Marie.
I do share the concern expressed by Pat of about 5%, but my question is, Uta, can you tell us really why we're making this change? I know we've all reviewed your slide, you read your slides, but your voiceover, really what justifies a suggestion for a change? And are we at risk of somewhat micromanaging what's happening at individual labs? Could we have more of a blanket statement about a minimum of 20 or 25% to be shared among 2 or 3 individuals that cover this and that expertise, so that we're not micromanaging? So these are my 2 questions.
Yeah. So yeah, to sort of reiterate, I think the concern of asking that the applicant program director commit 20% may disincentivize or make it almost impossible for leaders, for the experts and leaders in the field to become or offer or apply as program directors, given other commitments that they have. And we really wanted to make sure that we have them on board, especially as we're envisioning that these shared labs will be coordinated into a network. And we wanted to make sure that we allow the top leaders to be able to apply. In terms of micromanaging how the leadership team comes about, I would say that we certainly we would leave it up to them to decide if they want to come in as a single program director or 2 people in the leadership role, and if they come with 2, how they divide those responsibilities. Now, I think you were saying, why not leave it open to them how many people should be in the leadership role? And I think that's
to a reasonable extent, up to 3, not a crew, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Chairman, as the lead of the scientific programs, could I add one piece of information?
Yes, please.
So I just wanted to remind everybody that for the past shared labs, we did not have a minimum requirement. So in terms of micromanagement, we had not imposed any minimum requirement, which could be another choice that we could have.
Thank you.
Deborah?
Yes, I'd like to share the perspective of Pat, and I really believe that there should be a 10% minimum. This is an important role, and for the person to really contribute substantively, I really believe that 10% should be the minimum, and I would recommend amending to have it at 10% minimum.
Thank you. Marv?
I also concur. I think Pat's suggestion of 10% is a good one.
Thank you. Larry?
Yeah, I think that I would endorse the CIRM staff's experience, since they've had experience with the running of these stem cell core labs. And for a scientific leader at the level of seniority that I think we'd like to see participate in these shared labs, 5% as a minimum strikes me as reasonable given what I've seen over the years. And remember that this person is providing a little bit more vision and much less of the day-to-day operation. And so a senior scientist who runs the day-to-day operations is very experienced, and we're relying on that senior person more for vision, not for the hands-on management of these labs.
Larry, thank you. Pat, would you like to respond to that?
Yeah. So, I see this effort as, I think we're all very strongly endorsing this, the shared facilities. That places a larger administrative burden on individuals who are leading at their various centers, because it requires engagement and interaction with other centers. And when you're doing it within the context of your own institute, it's one thing. When you're doing it in the context of a network, I think there's added level of responsibilities. And so 5% to oversee this engagement in being part of this network is going to require more than just internal meetings and internal management of QC. The success of this is going to depend upon the quality that's generated at these individual centers and how they engage and interact. Additional communications, making sure that management, whoever's doing the daily management, understands what their responsibilities are. I just see this as something different than what has been funded in the past in terms of individual institutional cores. So I just think 5%, 2 hours a week, and we understand that it's not 40 hours, it's probably 60 hours. But even if 5% is 60 hours, you're talking 3 hours a week. It's just not realistic. And all of us who are senior leaders have administrative responsibilities as well as running research laboratories, have to make decisions about what we're going to put our time into. And if they're at 95% on grants, extramural grants, and they only have 5%, or they're at 70 or 80% and they have a large administrative responsibility, that's a decision that they have to make. And I agree with the sentiment of lowering it from 20 for sure, because 20 would preclude lots of senior leaders from participating. But I don't see 10% being very restrictive, and I think it reflects a greater reality of what they will need to be doing.
Thank you, Pat. Larry, would you care to respond to that?
Yeah, I guess my experience is just different than Pat's. You know, I think I've seen folks who are at the levels of seniority and accomplishment that we want, who would be unable to commit more than 10%, more than 5%. And you remember that these are going to be reviewed by the grants working group. They're going to review what the arrangements are. And I think we should avoid micromanaging too much here. I think the CIRM staff have done a good job in evaluating how best to proceed. And that, plus the review of what the arrangements would be, strikes me as not only adequate, but will help us attract the very best scientific leaders. I mean, I'll use the example of a nameless person at Stanford who is highly recognized in this field, who you would love to attract to provide the vision and leadership for one of these core labs. And the day-to-day internal administrative functions, all of the budgeting and dealing with the institutional administration, that's done by a senior scientist who's the right-hand person of a scientific or medical leader.
Deborah, you're taking this in, would you like to respond to last few comments, please?
I have no change in my recommendation.
Okay.
I'm still maintain that 10% should be a minimum.
Okay, thank you. Kim?
Yeah, I tend to agree with Larry, and I think we all know that there will be some weeks when it's 20 hours that this person will devote, and other weeks where the thing is just rolling along and they don't have to devote any time. But I really wanted to ask whether this was a sort of data-driven process. Were these percentages just arrived at out of the air, or did you have evidence from the field that the 5% number was the right one, or did you have senior people telling you that they would not be able to apply with the previous standard? I do agree that 20% for the single person was too much of an ask.
Well, so thank you. For full disclosure, looking at the actual percent commitment that the program directors for the previous shared labs offered, it was between 5 and 10%. The concern that we would be excluding the senior leaders in the field comes from general experiences that we do have as CIRM staff when we talk to them, for instance, about applying for other awards, and where we often require 20% effort and concerns that they cannot commit, they just don't have the room, to officially commit that amount of time. And so those two things combined led us to propose the 5% minimum.
If I might also follow up, some of the times the consideration is that these senior people tend to have much higher levels of compensation than the scientific sort of management function, and to ask them to take a much larger percentage really has budgetary implications.
Okay, are there other comments from members of the board? We seem to sort of, from those commenting, we seem to have a fairly even split between 5 and 10 here. Other thoughts? Fred.
This is Linda Malkus.
Hi,
yeah.
Linda, and then
Hi
Fred.
there. It's a little different what I'm going to say here, but I when I put in our grants, we put in a lot of grants. I only put in 5% on the grants, and actually none of the funding agencies ever blink an eye. I know this is different than what you're talking about here, but my salary would eat part of the grant. But it's kind of like an unspoken thing throughout the scientific enterprise. And I don't know if I should even be revealing this, but it's having 5% on there probably means that I'm putting probably 25 or 50% of my time really towards whatever that activity is. The person who is doing this understands, very likely understands the responsibility, and so the discussion of the effort piece here, I work I do a lot with a lot of the different federal agencies, and it's just kind of understood that you're going to put in what you have to put in, and whether it's 5 or 10% is really it's not, it's not, you're going to get the job done. I guess that's what I want to just say. So, if you are aiming for a very high level person to do this, their time, so somebody made the comment that maybe we won't get as a high achiever as we would like by asking, technically, by having this higher level of commitment. But even if they say they're going to do 5%, I could almost guarantee that whoever takes the role will be putting in way more effort than 5%. But I wouldn't want to have this percent effort thing and be used or be a deterrent to getting the best person that you can for this. That's all I want to say. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Linda. Fred?
JT, since you were asking for tiebreakers, I was going to break the tie and go with the staff's recommendation and the motion that's currently on the table. We're talking about the difference between 2 hours a week and 4 hours a week, which to me is immaterial in the real world. I understand how 10% sends a message in terms of the relative importance that we place on the engagement of that person, but I don't know that the difference between 2 and 4 hours is going to, from a practical point of view, make that change. And from sort of a more fiscal point of view, making projects more expensive by increasing the time of that person, which basically puts more money, moves money sort of away from the direct science that we're looking to fund and more in the admin side. I'm not sure that's a good thing either. So I will help add weight to the idea of sticking with the current motion and going along with the staff's recommendation.
Thank you, Fred. David?
Yeah, I'm last in line here. I just wanted to second what Anne Marie first brought up and what Larry expanded on and what Fred just talked about. And that is let's let our staff be the staff, let them do the job. And we can always change it. We can always, they've got reasons for what they've come up with. And if it doesn't work, we can change it. So I would just second the motion of sticking with the staff recommendation.
Thank you. Anne Marie?
Yeah, in fact, I'm saying exactly the same with the benefit of Uta's explanations and the discussion. I think I cannot come with a better proposal than the one that you suggested, and that is on the slide, Uta.
Thank you. Pat?
Yeah, I just want to say that what Fred said, I think is really important. There's no doubt that all of us who are PIs on grants put in much more time than what we're allotted, and most of us who are senior are making above the NIH cap anyway. So that's not the issue, and the issue in terms of cost to the grant between 5 and 10% is trivial. That's not going to impact the ability of the project to be completed, but it does send a message of what's expected between 5 and 10%, and there's a difference. There's just a difference of opinion. Program officers at NIH, at least the ones that I've interacted with at many institutions, at many of the institutes, find 5% for a PI to be less than optimal in terms of at least a psychosocial commitment to this. Can I ask one other question? So this 5% would apply to existing cores for that group, as well as the 5% minimum for the PI of an application coming from a new site?
The way it's envisioned right now, yes.
So there's a sense that 5% effort, if you're starting a new core at a new site, would be sufficient?
Well, we would actually require that if the applicant program director came in with a request for 5%, we would require that the second leadership role be at least 15%. So it's the team together with the 20%, and they could divide the percentage differently. But yeah, I want to emphasize that we are expecting the leadership team to have at least 20% together.
Okay, all right. I'm fine with that. If it's being uniformly applied, I didn't want to see differential differences in how this was going to be applied.
Yeah.
I disagree with the 5%, but I'm happy to go forward with the amendment as it is.
Okay, let me ask is there anybody that would like to make an amendment to the amendment, as it were? Because if so, I want Mr. Tosher to walk us through what that process would mean. So does anybody want to amend the motion? Okay, well, hearing that, I think, first of all, thank you. That was an excellent discussion on the topic. Very important perspectives brought to bear. So hearing no request to amend, any other comments by members of the board at this point? Any comments from members of the public?
There are none.
Thank you. Maria, will you please call the roll?
Haifa Abdullah,
Yes.
Mohammed Abuslam,
Yes.
Kim Barrett,
Aye.
Dan Bernal,
Aye.
George Blumenthal,
Yes.
Michael Botchin, Linda Boxer,
Yes.
Judy Chow.
Can I skip this one because I just logged in?
Of course. Leandra Clark Harvey.
Yes.
Deborah Dees.
Yes.
Anne Marie Dulage.
Yes.
Isabel Dudon.
Yes.
Mark Fisher Colbury. Fred Fisher.
Yes.
Elena Flowers.
Yes.
Judy Gasson.
Yes.
Larry Goldstein.
Yes.
David Higgins.
Yes.
Steve Julesgaard.
Yes.
Rich Lahara, Pat Levitt.
Can I abstain?
You can.
Okay, I abstain.
Linda Malkus. Linda? Are you on
Sorry,
mute?
sorry, it's
Oh,
muted.
it's okay.
Yes, yes.
Thank you. Shlomo Melmed.
Yes.
Christine Miskowski. Lauren Miller Rogan.
Yes.
Adriana Padilla.
Yes.
Joe Panetta.
Yes.
Al Roulette.
Yes.
Barry Selleck.
Yes.
Marv Southard.
Yes.
Michael Stamos.
Suzanne Sammeyer voting yes.
Thank you, Suzanne. John Thomas.
Yes.
Art Toros. Art.
Yeah, Artura's aye.
Thank you. Carol Watson. The motion carries.
Thank you, Maria. Last action item before closed session is consideration of conflicts of interest policy for the accessibility and affordability working group presentation by Mr. Tosher.
Great, thanks very much, JT, and still morning. Good morning, everyone. So this is a really largely a housekeeping matter. As you know, this board's work is assisted in part by the advice and recommendations of the Institute's formal working groups. And they are, as you are probably aware, the grants, facilities, and the standards working groups. And of course, Proposition 14 added a fourth working group, the access and affordability working group. Now, the law has declared that because these working groups are purely advisory to the board, the state's conflict of interest laws do not apply to the non-ICOC members of these working groups. However, to ensure the integrity of the advice of these groups, the board is responsible for adopting its own conflict of interest policies and apply them to the non-ICOC members of those groups. And the board has fulfilled that responsibility with respect to the first three working groups that I mentioned that were established by Prop 71. So the purpose of this item then is to adopt an interim COI policy to apply to the AAWG and to authorize the CIRM team to initiate the process for making permanent these COI rules. So what we did in drafting the proposed language for this policy was, instead of starting at ground zero, we relied on work that the board undertook back in 2016 when it updated and revised the COI rules that apply to our grants working group. And we propose today to leverage that work by modeling this policy for the AAWG closely on the one applicable to the grants working group. Because both groups consider recommendations, among other things, regarding specific applications for funds or contracts, we believe that it's best that the AAWG's policies mirror those of the grants working group as well. Now, these rules will be fairly intuitive in application, as are the grants working groups, and will identify financial interests that would disqualify members from participating in consideration of an application or contract in the event that the member has a conflict. And the ICOC has generally defined potential conflicts for our working group members according to three types. Those are financial, personal, and professional. So for instance, if a non-ICOC member or their immediate family member is an employee of an applicant organization, or is a key person on the application, or is somehow promised income above a certain threshold from the applicant, then a conflict will exist and the member will be precluded from participating in the consideration of that award. A professional conflict would arise where the member and an individual on the application are engaged in or planning to engage in a joint project of some sort. And a personal conflict would be present where an immediate family member or close personal friend is a person listed on the application as a key personnel, or where the member and a person listed have been on opposing sides in a lawsuit or similar dispute. As part of the process prior to consideration of an application, a module will be set up internally in our grants review process that will identify key institutions and individuals for an application, and members will have the opportunity to review that list and identify potential conflicts in advance of the meeting. As contained in our grants working group policy, this also contains a special exemption process whereby, I'm sorry, you could have advanced. I'm sorry, I wasn't paying attention to the, you can go one more to the display. There is a special exemption process whereby if the president finds that the need for special expertise of an individual member who otherwise has a conflict, where that need outweighs a potential bias, the member may participate in the discussion, but will not be permitted to vote on or score that matter. I can tell you that historically, that exception has only very rarely been utilized. So the advantage also of following sort of the grants working group policy as a model is that relatively recently in 2016, went through the adoption process of the Office of Administrative Law, which is a state agency that reviews our policies before they become official regulations. This can be a very in-depth review. It is an in-depth review, and this policy has the benefit of having gone through that OAL process and been approved by the OAL. So we have a track record with this language passing muster with OAL. So what we're proposing then, you can go to the next slide, is to adopt the language on an interim basis to be effective January 15th next month, while authorizing us to simultaneously begin the formal public comment period and adoption process through OAL in order to permanently adopt the conflict rules. This will not be the last time the board would see any language. We would bring this back at the conclusion of the OAL process to discuss any possible amendments or public comment that we received during that process. I know that's a bit of a mouthful on process issues, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Tosher. Do we have a motion to approve?
I make the motion, Mohammed.
Let's see. I think Senator Torres seconded by Mohammed. Questions or comments of Mr. Tosher?
Yes.
Art.
Yes, I want to, Scott, I want to thank you for all the work you put into this and to make sure that we're consistent with all our general policies of conflicts of interest. As the author of this language in the new initiative with Bob Klein, it was very important for us to make sure that the consistency was going to occur, not only in terms of rulemaking and the need for conflict of interest regulations, but I'm glad you've taken the time, because I know how much time it takes to go through all of the AOL and other agencies that beleaguer any state agency. But clearly you've done a very good job, and I want to thank you again for putting this into motion.
Thank you.
Thank you, Art. Other comments, questions from members of the board? Any public comment?
There's no public comment.
Maria, will you please call the roll?
Haif Abdullah,
Yes.
Mohammed Abuslam,
Yes.
Kim Barrett,
Aye.
Dan Bernal,
Aye.
George Blumenthal,
Yes.
Michael Botchin, Linda Boxer,
Yes.
Judy Chow,
Yes.
Leandra Clark Harvey,
Yes.
Deborah Dees,
Yes.
Anne-Marie Dulege,
Yes.
Isabel Dudon,
Yes.
Mark Fisher Colbury, Fred Fisher,
Yes.
Elena Flowers,
Yes.
Judy Gasson,
Yes.
Larry Goldstein,
Yes.
David Higgins,
Yes.
Steve Julesgard,
Yes.
Rich Lahara, Pat Levitt,
Yes.
Linda Malkus,
Yes.
Shlomo Melmed,
Yes.
Christine Miskowski, Lauren Miller Rogan,
Yes.
Adriana Padilla,
Yes.
Joe Panetta,
Yes.
Al Rolette,
Yes.
Barry Selleck,
Yes.
Marvin Southard,
Yes.
Michael Stamos,
Yes.
Jonathan Thomas,
Yes.
Art Torres,
Aye.
Carol Watson. The motion carries.
Okay, thank you, Maria. We're going to take a 5-minute break. And when we reconvene, we will then turn to Karen Getman to read us the appropriate language for adjourning to a closed session. So back in 5, everybody. Well, since it's 10:54, let's make it an even top of the hour. Thank you.
Sean, if you, oops, excuse me. Hello, Sean.
Yeah,
Oh,
hello.
sorry about that. If you want to test your share real quick, pop it up on the screen to make sure it's working well.
Yeah, got a new screen.
We can see it. Looks good.
Okay, good. That works. Thank
All right.
you.
You're welcome.
Okay, it is 11 o'clock. We are reconvened. Karen, if you would like to give us instructions for adjourning to closed session, please.
Thank you. We are moving into closed session for a discussion of personnel and in particular the compensation for CIRM CEO and president that is pursuant to Government Code Section 11126 Subdivision A and Health and Safety Code Section 125290.30 F3D.
Okay, thank you. Doug is taking us into the breakout room, so if everybody could click join, and we will see you in a second. Okay, I'm assuming everybody is back.
Maria, can you, do you want to check? Then we've got a quorum and everyone's back.
You're muted, Maria.
Checking now.
Yeah, I'm just counting. I believe, Scott, I have 24. How about you? I think that's about right.
Yes, quorum is 23.
Great. So we're ready to go.
Okay, thank you. The board is reconvening from closed session. And we have a motion to entertain for the board with respect to item number 14 as the bullet point notes compensation for CIRM CEO. So we want to have a motion that we have a merit increase of 3% above current salary for Maria, which takes us to a total of, somebody can do the math very quickly.
583, 490 is what I got.
Okay, so the number on the motion is to increase Maria's salary, which is above the median that we discussed at an earlier meeting, up to the number that Karen just indicated. Is there a second for that?
Aye.
Second. Is there discussion from members of the board?
Is that Anne Marie and Art? I'm sorry.
Doesn't matter. Yeah, either or. Yeah.
No, both. Okay, great. Thank you.
Any discussion from members of the public?
I do not see any hands raised.
Okay, that being the case, Maria, will you please call the roll?
Haifa Abdullah,
Yes.
Mohammed Abuslam,
Yes.
Kim Barrett,
Hi.
Dan Bernal, George Blumenthal, Michael Botchin, Linda Boxer,
Yes.
Judy Chow,
Yes.
Leandra Clark Harvey,
Yes.
Deborah Deese,
Yes.
Anne Marie Dulege,
Yes.
Isabel Dudon,
Yes.
Mark Fisher Colbury, Fred Fisher,
Yes.
Elena Flowers,
Yes.
Judy Gasson,
Yes.
Mary Goldstein,
Yes.
David Higgins,
Yes.
Steve Julesgard,
Yes.
O'Hara, Pat Levitt,
Yes.
Linda Malkus,
Yes.
Hamu Melmed. Shlomo, are you on? And I just can't, nope, he's not on. Okay. Lauren Miller, I'm sorry? No. Lauren Miller Rogan,
Yes.
Adriana Padilla,
Yes.
Joe Panetta, Al Rolette,
Yes.
Barry Selleck,
Yes.
Marvin Southern,
Yes.
Michael Stamos,
Yes.
Jonathan Thomas,
Yes.
Art Torres,
Aye.
Carol Watson. Motion carries.
Thank you. I believe Maria Milan's video is not working, but Maria, if you're on the phone, you wanted to comment?
I just wanted to thank the board very much for this merit increase. It's my honor to serve in this role. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Maria. Okay. On to item number 15, consideration of compensation. Oh, no, sorry, wrong thing. Sorry, where am I here? Updates from the Accessibility and Affordability Working Group.
I think Sean Tuberville is going to be doing that.
Yes,
Sean,
sir. I am here. Unfortunately, I can't show my video right now. I'm locked out. Maria, is there
You just have to turn your camera back on. That's all.
The host has stopped it.
You're there. We can
There, lovely. All right, let me go ahead and start my slides. All right, well, good afternoon, everybody. In addition to, and thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the opportunity to present this update. In addition to Jeff Lomax's presentation on the standard working group, which was one of our initiatives, I'm going to provide an update on two other initiatives, work streams that we have kicked off in medical affairs. So one of the updates is to the ICOC, and that is give an update on the CCE, the Community Care Centers of Excellence listening session. Recently that took place at UCSF Fresno. I do want to pause here and immediately acknowledge UCSF, particularly Lynn Smiley, as well as our group on the medical affairs side. It was a fairly heavy lift and a very good session. But it was a fairly quick one and successful. So certainly want to give due diligence to all the heavy lift that got us to that session. And then second, I want to introduce and kick off our roadmap for access and affordability. So as a refresher, one of our 5-year strategic goals is to create and launch the Community Care Centers of Excellence that support diverse patient participation in the rapidly regenerative medicine landscape. So in tandem with the Alpha Clinic, now we have 9, these community care centers of excellence would provide a clinical infrastructure for research, training, programs, and outreach to best serve patients who participate in regenerative medicine trials or receive approved treatments in the community, and particularly in rural areas. So in order to prepare for this important program, we began creating several regional listening sessions for information gathering. So that is, we asked the community to give us guidance on what the Community Care Centers Excellence program should look like. What are the needs? What are the clinical needs? What are the community needs? And we'll take that feedback into the AAWG with respect to down the road developing a concept plan. So through these listening sessions, we are aiming to develop a draft concept plan with the AAWG to present to the ICOC for a final approval in June of 2023. So this slide shows the 3 areas that we were targeting with respect to the concept plan. 1, understand the capacities of regional providers to support clinical research. 2, identify workforce training needs to support patients in regenerative medicine. And 3, identify opportunities to partner with community-based organizations. And again, the ultimate goal is to create a new mechanism with a concept plan for organizations to apply for funding for this particular program. So in October 25th, Medical Affairs kicked off our first listening session at the Fresno Clovis UCSF facility. This was considered an enthusiastic meeting where we had about 30 participants, which included healthcare providers, individuals involved in workforce development, and also community members with the understanding of the needs and capacities of providers, the clinic, the workforce, and the community. So this slide summarized some of the key takeaways, and this is preliminary. We categorize this into 3 buckets. 1, clinical readiness. 2, training. And 3, increased patient access. So one of the things that we learn, and I like to, instead of going through each one of these components, give you a high level take-home message for what we learned from this meeting. So one thing that we learned from the Fresno experience was that there was a comprehensive infrastructure already to support the clinical research. In addition, they were eager to collaborate with our Alpha Clinics networks. And there were a number of potential opportunities and collaborations which we could take back to the AAWG. What we observed was that the main takeaway was not that they felt they needed the infrastructure, it was the know-how and the methodology and the training and the ability to support a network within our existing clinical sites. Another strong theme that emerged was continuing medical education. So as the physicians felt that there was still very limited knowledge about regenerative medicine, cell and gene therapy. And for many of you have just probably returned from ASH, we are still trying to download all of the information that was provided on cell and gene therapies. There's a ton of information out there. One of the suggestions from the committee here was to work with the California Medical Association to bring education and visibility to the types of programs we are supporting. Another finding was how physicians refer patients to local sites and clinical trials. And finally, just as important, how we engage with the community-based organizations to not only listen, but to also gain the trust at the local community level. So in retrospect, this was a pilot program. This was sort of our first rodeo, if you will. We did get quite a bit of feedback. I think it was a successful pilot program, provided good feedback on our approach for our next meetings that were going to take place in the next 2 months. So we are planning 2 more meetings, one in Riverside and the other in Redding Shasta area. There are suggestions about perhaps other. One of the caveats here with this information is that it may not be generalizable to obviously all of California. And that's why we're going after other geographical areas to ask the same questions. And again, concatenate all this information over time and present it to the AAWG. And then finally, we may present or at least consider a final program for a public workshop to summarize our findings from all of these listening sessions. So that is the main take-home message from our recent Community Care Centers of Excellence. I think right now, perhaps, Mr. Chairman, I'll pause to see if there's any questions or comments about that program.
Thank you, Sean. I'd just like to point out Dr. Padilla and I were at this meeting on behalf of the board, along with Jeff Lomax, who led the discussion, did a very good job. Maria Bonneville was there as well, and other members of the medical affairs team with Sean. There was tremendous enthusiasm voiced by every single participant about the concept of the Community Care Centers of Excellence. And they are eagerly looking forward to having the opportunity to apply at such time as the RFA is circulated. It highlighted a real need in that area in many different respects, which Sean has alluded to, and drove home the point about how the Community Care Centers of Excellence are going to be a very material add in terms of accessibility to our Alpha Clinics network, which, as you recall, we recently expanded to 9 facilities. And so this was, as a first meeting, was terrific, in my opinion. Adriana, would you like to, are you on? Is Adriana on? I'm sure she's on. Maria's on.
Yes, thank you.
Yes.
Am I still muted or not muted?
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you.
Okay, great. No, I just want to say thank you. It was a really nice get together, and thank you for Sean to put this on and do an excellent summary for us. I just wanted to say that it was really nice to see the UC Davis Alpha Center there. Very helpful to reach out. And I think that if other Alpha Centers that are close to us can reach out and work in a collaborative way, it's just going to take off that much faster.
Okay, very good. Any other comments?
I'd like to make a very minor comment. Well, the first comment is not minor. I really applaud this effort. I'm very glad, of course, that UC Davis was represented. My very minor comment, Sean, for further dissemination of these very important takeaways is to correct the spelling of peer-to-peer. I think we mean P-E-E-R here, not P-I-E-R.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, good catch. Okay, very good. Well, Mr. Chairman, if it's okay, I'd like to move over to another update.
Certainly.
Good. So another 5-year strategic plan is to coordinate with the AEWG in developing a roadmap for access and affordability of regenerative medicine for all California patients. So this roadmap will include a strategy for gathering the necessary data to support reimbursement, to engage with policymakers and regulators, and develop healthcare delivery models that can be implemented and refined with the Alpha clinics and future community care centers of excellence. So in January of 2023, we will kick off the development of a focusing on, kick off one of our roadmaps for affordability and accessibility. We will be focusing for the most part on CIRM funded clinical trials and potentially approved therapies. So this slide is just an example that we presented to the AEWG about a week ago of the strategies we recently brought for input, recommendation, and consideration. This is by no means vetted. It's just an example of some of the strategies that we want to consider going after. These strategies are aligned with the language in Proposition 14. So some of the strategies we would like to consider include the following. 1, facilitate reimbursement and limit patient expenses. So there is a lot of activity right now with respect to out-of-patient costs when it comes to not only commercial as well as clinical trials. This section, and I'm not going to go over each one of these categories with respect to the tactics, but this is where our patient support services sit. And we're looking forward to launching that program, bringing back data to the AEWG to show the impact that we're having for patients, not only on the financial side, but the ability to access trials as well. The other strategy that we're considering is the support for new payer models. So 1, there is a lot of activity right now with value-based payments. Some of you are probably involved with that. We've already received quite a bit of input from our AEWG colleagues who have gotten us in contact with subject matter thought leaders, if you will, on what these programs look like. There's an opportunity for us to engage. We just recently found out on the private side with private payers, there are concatenating, if you will, risk pools and correlation partners. So there are quite a few strategies that we can look at that would allow us to support some of the new payer models for cell and gene therapies. Another strategy that we may want to consider is the state policy issue. And do we want to consider creating and or endorsing new state policy for cell and gene therapies at the state level? We have an opportunity also at the federal level. Senator Torres already got us in contact with the governor's plan and some of the colleagues over there on the Office of Health and Affordability. So there's a good opportunity for us to have some synergies with the state. And then finally, another strategy is to expand the clinical infrastructure. And this is really just a piggyback on all the great work CIRM has already done with the Alpha clinics. Those have expanded. We have an opportunity to work with, let's say, post-marketing registries, which is a a big demand with respect to those value-based payments for cell and gene therapy. Those are critical. We have an opportunity to explore real-world evidence with the alpha clinics and the repository of data that's out there. That includes HEOR as well. Another component, of course, is to accelerate advocacy at the community level and the medical education. So the goal moving forward here is the next 6 months, every month we will be presenting data for each one of these strategies to the AEWG. We will go back and do our diligence on the research. We'll bring in our subject matter experts, then present that to the AEWG. Cumulatively over 6 months, we're hoping that we will have an improved roadmap for access and affordability through those processes, and then present that to the ICOC for final approval and perhaps execution of some of these programs. So with that, again, this is just kicking off in January. We have a full schedule up until June, July. We've had a productive 9 months from the medical affairs side, and we're looking forward to continuing the momentum in 2023. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll go ahead and punt it back over to you, and thank you for the opportunity for the update.
Thank you very much, Sean. Are there questions or comments of Sean on this particular slide?
Fred has his hand raised.
Fred.
Yeah, just quickly, thank you, Sean, for this. Speaking as the patient advocate for ALS and MS, I'll just go on record that these value-based initiatives are a nightmare for the ALS, MS, and other neurodegenerative disease communities. Probably spinal cord injury fits in there as well. So I would encourage us to look very carefully and get lots of feedback from stakeholders and various groups, patient groups, about the potential impact of value-based models for coverage. The other thing that I didn't hear you mention explicitly, but we'll just put on the table, is hopefully at some point in your process, you will engage the California Department of Managed Care, which I think covers about 90% of insurers in the state, as well as the California Department of Insurance, which deals with the other 10, because that's when it comes to coverage for care, even for people who are well insured, the therapies for neurodegenerative disease are the ones that have been approved recently are exceedingly expensive, and insurance companies' first response is to look for a way to deny coverage even to those who have insurance, let alone those who don't. So I'll leave it at that. I know you have a lot more work to do, but figured I'd just put that out for now. Thanks.
Thank you. Good comments.
Any other questions or comments of Sean?
Yeah, I was just going to, JT, it's Pat. At the meeting, we talked about, at the subcommittee meeting, we talked about the issues that Fred raised, and it applies broadly to challenges in terms of pay, in terms of reimbursement situations in pediatrics in general in California. We're among the worst states, and with schedules that have, in some cases, haven't been updated for 10, 12 years. And so this issue around accessibility and affordability is going to be a real one. We already know there's lots of data that indicates that if you're on Medi-Cal as a pediatric patient, your wait time is significantly longer than if you have private insurance. Wait time to just get in to see a physician, and that will translate in terms of what we're trying to do here. So Sean and I have conversed offline as well, and he's well aware of this, and I think is doing a superb job in leading this effort, this very important effort.
Okay, thank you, Pat. Other questions or comments from members of the board?
Just wanted to agree with Pat.
Thank you, Art.
Hallelujah.
Other questions or comments?
David Higgins has his hand raised.
David.
Yeah, the recent proposition that passed that refunded us for another $5 billion included, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, JT, but a commitment to spend $1.5 billion of that in neuroscience or not necessarily neurodegenerative, but science based disease, neurological diseases. Does this effort that we're hearing about here today reflect that sort of lopsided, if you will? I don't mean to I'm obviously not trying to disparage neurological diseases, but is there any reflection in your effort as to what the proposition's sort of unbalanced effort towards neurology was? Like, do you go out and look for specifically for neurological diseases to bring into this program? What might be one question?
Yeah, that's certainly.
Go ahead, Sean.
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly an initiative, and we had a discussion about that yesterday. Some of those are early stage assets. And so when we're starting to think about access and affordability, once those start going through that pipeline and get to the clinic, then I think, yeah, there could be a component here where we could start assessing some of that. And that's true all the way through that life cycle management to commercialization. But for specifically right now, these are mostly clinical trials as well as commercial products.
We on that point, when Bob Klein and I wrote this language, there was much internal debate among the supporters and activists that some scientists said, no, don't create a separate entity. Others saying you're not paying enough attention to neurological diseases. You ought to have at least a separate amount that you concentrate on. And that's where we ended up. Now it's up to CIRM to develop a strategy, which it is in the process of doing. And I think, David, you're going to be part of those discussions, as are the other advocates from ALS, MS, and neurodegenerative diseases, to make sure that the next steps that we take starting in January, February, are leading toward a strategic plan for the utilization of the 1.5 billion.
Great. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions for Sean?
Thank you again, Sean.
Welcome. Thank you for the opportunity.
Okay, last item. This is this new section we've added. To the extent there are any general comments from members of the board about the application review process. This is looking for any board comment, any members. This is sort of a placeholder item here, so we'll at any such time in future meetings where there are comments, we'll have the opportunity. So we're now at public comment. Any members of the public wish to make any comment about anything in particular?
I don't see any, JT.
Okay, thank you, Mary Ann. Well, that concludes today's meeting. I would like to adjourn in Kevin's memory. And although this is to go full circle to the beginning of the meeting, a very sad time, I know that Kevin, were he here, would say to all of you lovely people, have a happy holiday season and a healthy, prosperous new year.
Thank you.
And everyone remember the January 26th in-person board meeting here in South San Francisco.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody. Happy holidays. We stand adjourned.
Happy
holidays.
Bye.